The untold histories of the American West. The Paiute people, wars, and legends today, we delve into the compelling history of the American West during the late 1800s, focusing on the Paiute tribe's experience amid the influx of white settlers in the 1850s. Our journey includes the conflicts that erupted between the Paiute people and the settlers, as well as an ancient war with a tribe of red-haired, cannibalistic natives that took place in the 1500s or 1600s. We'll explore these stories through life among the Paiutes, their wrongs and claims, a powerful first-hand account written by Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins, published in 1883. Sarah Winnemucca was born into the northern Paiute tribe near Lake Humboldt in northern Nevada in 1844. Her people initially greeted white settlers with peaceful intentions, a sentiment led by her grandfather, Chief Truckee, who had befriended explorer John Fremont during his 1843 expedition. Chief Truckee even supported the U.S. Army during the Spanish-American War, forging a bridge between his people and the newcomers. Our story begins in 1858 when Chief Truckee sent his granddaughter, Sarah, to live with Major William Ormsby, the leader of a local militia in Carson City, Nevada. At around 14 years old, Sarah lived with Ormsby's family, where she quickly learned English and witnessed a brief period of peace between her people and the settlers. However, Sarah also recounts how tensions eventually escalated into conflict, marking the end of a fragile coexistence. She also narrates the legendary tale of an ancient war between the Paiutes and a cannibalistic tribe of red-haired natives. This oral history, passed down through generations, captures the haunting intensity of the battles her ancestors faced long before the arrival of white settlers. By 1858, white settlers had established homes along the Carson River. Sarah recalls each family, recounting with vivid detail the settlers who had become familiar faces in her homeland. Among them were Mr. Olds, Mr. Palmer, and others like Dr. Daggett and Mr. Van Sickle, all living along the river's banks in simple houses. Some settlers had large families. Others were alone. Each was known by name, each a part of the community. Sarah describes a harmonious life without theft or loss of livestock, where trading was conducted fairly, horses for guns, but never did her people ask for payment for their lands. As settlers continued to arrive, so did new challenges. The year 1859 marked the arrival of the Mormons who settled in the Carson Valley, where the now bustling Carson City stands. Yet, despite the growing presence of outsiders, Sarah's people continued their peaceful coexistence. Then, in the fall of 1859, a tragic event unfolded. A beloved white settler, Mr. McMullen, set out for California to gather winter provisions. Together with Mr. McWilliams, they camped in the nearby mountains. That night, both men were tragically murdered. In an attempt to frame the Paiute, their killers placed arrows in the wounds, a tactic meant to incite anger against the tribe. When news spread, settlers quickly accused the Paiutes, claiming that the use of arrows was undeniable proof of the tribe's guilt. Sarah's account gives us a rare window into the turbulence, injustices, and enduring spirit of the Paiute people during this complex chapter of American history. Her words reflect not only the pain of her people, but also their resilience amid growing adversity. That afternoon, a group of 30 men set out to retrieve the bodies of the two slain men, bringing back the arrows found at the scene. The immediate assumption was that the Paiute people were responsible. My brother, Natchez, and our cousin, known as Young Winnemucca, along with 100 others, were summoned. At the time, my brother held the title of Peace Chief. Major Ormsby asked if we recognized the arrows, and my cousin informed him that they belonged to the Washoe tribe. Seeking justice, Major Ormsby asked my brother if he would help bring in the Washoe chief to address the crime. My brother agreed, promising to help find those responsible for John McMullen's death. That evening, my people held what we called a war dance, the first I had ever seen. Many white townsfolk, including women, came to watch, fascinated by the ceremony. Lizzie Ormsby kept asking, "Where is Natchez?" not recognizing him in his ceremonial attire. When the dance concluded, Major Ormsby gathered his men and led them in singing the Star-Spangled Banner, a familiar song, but different from the way my grandfather used to sing it. The next morning, my cousin, the war chief, sent 5 men to bring the Washoe chief, who soon arrived with about 10 of his people. As they arrived, the settlers gathered, and Major Ormsby showed them the arrows, asking if they recognized them. The Washoe chief, known as Captain Jam, confirmed the arrows were indeed his people's. Major Ormsby, turning to Natchez, instructed, "Tell Captain Jam that his people have taken 2 lives, and he must bring forward those responsible, along with the money taken. They won't be harmed, and justice will be served." Captain Jam responded, "I know my people did not kill these men. We have all been at Pine Nut Valley. None of us were away." In disbelief, my cousin, the war chief, warned him, "We will give you 10 days to bring forward the culprits. If you fail, we will be forced into conflict. The white men have been kind to us. Who could harm them? Now go and bring back those men." The Washoe departed, weighed down by the gravity of the situation. That evening, my brother gathered his men and discussed the tragic circumstances. All agreed it was indeed strange, though time would reveal the truth. 6 days later, Captain Jam returned with 3 young prisoners. One had a wife, while the other 2 were accompanied by their mothers. The settlers gathered, locking the men in a small house overnight as crowds murmured about justice. The following morning, the scene grew tense as settlers arrived. Some shouted for the prisoners to be hanged immediately, while young boys threw stones and hurled insults. In the afternoon, a troop of 31 armed men arrived. As they marched toward the prisoners, Washoe women began to cry, fearing for their loved ones. One woman pleaded with my brother, "These men are innocent. They have not left our camp in over a month. The chief has brought these 3 because they are without fathers. Almighty Chief, save my poor brother. He supports my mother and me." Another woman, newly married, knelt before my cousin and cried, "Good Spirit, whisper into the hearts of these people to spare my husband's life. Our chief gave him to you out of fear for our tribe. He is innocent, and his blood should not be shed to save us all." With a heavy heart, my brother addressed the Washoes. "These white men intend to take these 3 men to California, where they will face trial." Just then, a woman cried out, pointing, "Look, they're taking them away." The sorrow of the Washoe mothers and wives echoed, pleading that their loved ones be spared this fate. As we watched, the 3 Washoe prisoners suddenly broke free and ran for their lives. Before my brother could reach them, shots rang out. 2 of the men were wounded, while the 3rd surrendered, raising his hands in a final, desperate plea. Tragically, all 3 died. The scene that followed was beyond anything I had ever imagined. At dawn, the Washoe people gathered at the site, overcome with grief. The young wife of one of the men threw herself onto her husband's lifeless body, her cries piercing the cold morning air. Their weeping was so deep and mournful that it seemed even the mountains might weep in sympathy. Bloodied and sorrowful, they embraced their lost ones as if to bring them back to life. Overcome with emotion, I rushed to Mrs. Ormsby, my heart breaking. I told her, "I believe those Washoe women. They swear their men were innocent, never leaving their camp. How could they be responsible for the white men's deaths?" Mrs. Ormsby, with a saddened but resolute tone, responded, "But the arrows, they were Washoe arrows, and their chief himself brought his men to us. My husband knows what he is doing." I returned to witness the Washoe's next steps for their dead, as I had heard they were like the Digger Indians who burned their dead. There, I saw the Washoe chief speaking with my brother. From his words, it was clear he was making a confession. He gestured toward the fallen men and admitted, "The women speak truth. It is I who have caused their deaths. Their blood is on my hands. Their spirits will haunt me, cursing me with misfortune until the end of my days." His confession left those around him in shock. The mother of one of the young men, heartbroken, cried out with a curse, "May the same fate befall you. May you live to see suffering at the hands of these white brothers you trust." She turned to her daughter, saying, "You are alone now, my child. Your brother, your protector, is gone. No more will he bring game to you, with his smile and his kindness." This was the first and only conflict the Washoe had with the settlers. a sorrowful beginning to a tragic end. The day passed in mourning, and the Washoe people took their dead to be cremated according to their customs. The remaining prisoner was taken to California. My little sister fell so ill from her sorrow that she could barely bear the day's events, and it took 2 weeks before we could travel to join our mother. By then, it was winter and deep snow covered our mountains, now known as Virginia City, but then called the Pine Nut Mountains. During the winter, news reached us. The real killers of McMullen and McWilliams had been found. When the Washoe chief heard, he approached my brother, Natchez, to demand compensation for his tribe's loss, saying, "The white men have hung 2 of their own as justice. I have come seeking payment for our 2 innocent men." My brother replied, "Your people handed them over to the white men themselves, so it is you who should seek justice for them. You gave them up, not us. We merely did our duty as we would for any allies, and the white men, in their ignorance, acted as they believed was right." The Washoe chief's sorrow lingered, a somber reminder of the misunderstandings and tragedies that marked this period in our history. As tensions simmered, my brother gave the Washoe chief a horse, a rare gift for the Washoes, who had never owned one. He then set out with 10 men, but shortly after, tragedy struck in an unexpected way. It all began when 2 young Paiute girls went into the woods to gather roots, but never returned. Desperate, their families, along with others from the tribe, searched tirelessly. They traced the girls' footsteps to the cabin of 2 traders, the Williams brothers, near the Carson River. The brothers denied seeing the girls and allowed the Paiutes to search their home, but days passed with no sign of the missing girls. Just as hope seemed lost, an Indian man rode to the Williams' cabin, intending to trade his horse for a gun, powder, and ammunition. After some bargaining, they agreed, yet the brothers withheld part of the payment. When the man refused their partial offer, they unleashed their dog on him. Bitten and startled, he shouted, and to his amazement, he heard the faint voices of children answering his cries. Recognizing the voices, he raced back to camp to report what he'd found. Enraged, my brother Natchez and others confronted the Williams brothers, demanding the return of the children. The brothers denied having them, but after heated words, one of the Paiutes struck one of the Williamses. The other brother quickly opened a trapdoor beneath his feet, surprising the Paiutes who had never seen such a thing. The girl's father peered down and, in the dim light, spotted his children, bound and gagged, lying on a small bed. Ripping away their restraints, he brought them up. Witnessing the girls' suffering, my people's fury ignited. The brothers were killed, and their house was set ablaze. 3 days later, rumors swept through the region, painting my people as bloodthirsty savages who had slaughtered 2 innocent, industrious settlers. Word spread to California, requesting army support. With no soldiers available, Major Ormsby organized 160 volunteers to seek vengeance. Without hearing our side, they demanded the surrender of those involved. My people refused, defending the father and brother as anyone would in their place. When the volunteers fired upon us, we took up arms to protect ourselves. And so, the 1860 Paiute War began. The conflict lasted around 3 months, claiming the lives of many of our people and over 100 settlers. Among those lost was Major Ormsby, our once beloved friend. My brother tried to save him, urging him to play dead as he fired overhead to protect him. But in the chaos, Major Ormsby hesitated, pleading for mercy, and was fatally shot by another man. In another act of courage, my brother defended Judge Broomfield, his servants, and a Spaniard who were not fighting against us. He stood guard at their cabin, fending off attackers with a club. Although he succeeded, his compassion angered our uncle and cousins, who whipped him for his loyalty to white friends. Though my uncle had always been dear to us, after that day, I could never see him in the same light. My brother, however, held no resentment. He remained quietly proud to have saved lives, a testament to his steadfast bravery in a world where noble deeds often go unrewarded. As the conflict continued, figures like Seth Cook from San Francisco stood by my brother, aiding him during these turbulent times. Though I can't recount all the details, Mr. Cook narrowly escaped death thanks to my brother's courage, a story he can still tell today. Eventually, regular troops arrived, and after brief fighting, a truce was declared, led by my brother, who raised the flag of peace. This truce established the Pyramid Lake Reservation in 1860, securing land and resources for my people, though promised supplies rarely arrived after the first year. Among our stories is the tale of a barbaric tribe that once dwelled along the Humboldt River many hundreds of years ago. These people-eaters, as they came to be known, were feared not only for killing my people but for devouring them. They dug hidden pits to trap our people who traveled at night, and they even unearthed our dead to feed their hunger. Occasionally, my ancestors would take prisoners from their ranks, but efforts to assimilate them failed. So, after enduring their terror for years, our ancestors decided to wage war on them. The battle was long and grueling, lasting 3 years. Though my people suffered losses, they eventually pushed the people-eaters into dense thickets near Humboldt Lake. My ancestors set the brush ablaze, forcing the survivors into the lake, where they attempted to live on makeshift boats of bulrush. Starving and weakened, they sought land but were met by my ancestors' watchful defense. Eventually, the remaining few fled to a cave on the eastern shore of the lake. My people, determined to end the threat, blocked the cave entrance with wood, calling out to the trapped tribe, "Will you surrender? Will you live as men and not as beasts?" Despite speaking the same language, the people-eaters refused to answer. Finally, my people set the wood aflame, hoping for a reply, but silence persisted. Days later, when my ancestors returned, they found the fire had burned out, leaving only a foul smell, proof that the last of the people-eaters had perished. Afterward, nearby tribes began calling us Saga, meaning conqueror or enemy, while some refer to us as the Paiute. It is not our name, but rather a misinterpretation. We are also known as the pine nut eaters, unique among tribes for living in pine nut territories. As for the people eaters, they were known for their reddish hair, which has been passed down in my family as a memory of that ancient struggle. A special dress, adorned with strands of this red hair, has been kept in my family, and I plan to wear it one day during a lecture. It is called the mourning dress, and it stands as a unique symbol of our family's legacy. So concludes this tale from Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins' book, Life Among the Paiutes, Their Wrongs and Claims. This account offers a rare and profound perspective on the lives and struggles of the Paiute people as settlers moved westward, forever changing our land and our history. The tale of the red-haired people who met their fate in Lovelock Cave has drawn interest not only from legend, but also from archaeology. Evidence of this story emerged when a company harvesting guano from Lovelock Cave uncovered artifacts and remains, providing potential support to the Paiute oral histories. These findings were documented in the 1929 book Lovelock Cave by Llewellyn L. Loud and M. R. Harrington. John T. Reed, a mining engineer familiar with the area, shared his family's connection with the cave and its stories. In 1887, Reed, then a teenager, accompanied Captain Natchez, along with two other Indians known as Coffee Charlie and Mustache Charlie, on a wild horse chase around the Carson and Humboldt sinks. During their journey, they passed Lovelock Cave and decided to camp nearby. That night, Captain Natchez shared a story that had been passed down through generations. He recounted the Paiute tribe's battle with a race of red-haired people believed to have been exterminated in that very cave. Natchez explained that the two groups spoke the same language, suggesting they had coexisted for a long period. Natchez didn't offer a reason for the conflict, though Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins had described the red-haired people as cannibals who preyed upon the Paiutes. Another version of the story, relayed by Annie Lowry, a half-Paiute woman, suggested that tensions arose when the red-haired people stole Paiute women and their wild rice seeds. Reed believed food scarcity likely contributed to the conflict, as prolonged droughts reduced the food supply of wild seeds and fowl around the lake. Natchez recounted how the Paiutes, driven to desperation, ultimately launched an aggressive campaign to remove the red-haired people. After pushing them northward into the Humboldt Lake area, many of the red-haired people took refuge in Lovelock Cave. The Paiutes, unwilling to relent, gathered sagebrush and set it ablaze, creating a wall of smoke and fire that suffocated the cave's entrance. The Paiutes waited at a distance, prepared to dispatch those who tried to escape the toxic smoke. Reed's account continues with details he gathered from local Lovelock residents about Lovelock Cave's first excavation. In 1911, David Pugh of Lovelock shared with Reed the discovery of an ancient cave about 20 miles south of town, which held significant archaeological evidence. This excavation yielded artifacts, further fueling interest in the possibility that the cave might indeed hold the remains of this mysterious red-haired race, as described in Paiute legends. This remarkable tale, bridging oral history and archaeology, adds layers to the understanding of Lovelock Cave and its significance in Paiute heritage. Whether myth or history, the story of the red-haired people remains an enduring mystery, woven into the cultural fabric of the Paiute people and preserved by the landscape they called home. In 1911, David Pugh and his team embarked on an excavation of Lovelock Cave, spurred by the value of bat guano as a fertilizer. As they dug into the cave's depths, for feet down, they unearthed a trove of Native American artifacts. Realizing the potential significance of their find, they reached out to the Smithsonian Institution and the University of California, but due to limited funds, only a few investigations could take place. Eventually, Llewellyn L. Loud from the University of California arrived, documenting the remnants of a mysterious history sealed within the cave. As the team worked, they found evidence of extensive fires that had blackened the cave walls, possible traces of the Paiute tradition describing how the tribe defeated a group of red-haired people who once lived in the region. In the deepest southern reaches of the cave, around 20 feet in, Pugh and his team discovered mummified remains. Most astonishingly, they found a male mummy, 6 feet 6 inches tall, with distinct red hair and a rope tied around his neck. His legs were bound, and he appeared well-preserved except for his abdomen. The other mummies, believed to be female, were smaller in stature and wore elaborate moccasins and buckskin garments. While native stories about the red-haired people portray them as a race of cannibals who clashed with the Paiutes centuries earlier, archaeologists have debated whether the red hair could be a natural characteristic or a result of mineral staining. Some speculate these individuals may have been descended from early Viking visitors, or even a distinct population like Japan's Ainu, known for their occasional blonde or red hair. The truth remains elusive, as scientific examination of the preserved hair continues to spark debate. The lore of Lovelock Cave intertwines with the story of the Pyramid Lake War, which began after 2 Paiute girls were abducted and mistreated at Williams Station, a stop on the Pony Express route. Enraged, the Paiute retaliated, leading to a skirmish in which Major Ormsby and numerous settlers, most with no formal military training, perished in battle. These incidents paint a vivid picture of Nevada's history and the complex encounters between native tribes and settlers. Channel sign off. This concludes today's episode, where we strive to bring overlooked and fascinating history to light. We honor figures like Sarah Winnemucca Hopkins, who preserved the Paiute legacy in her 1883 book Life Among the Paiutes, Their Wrongs and Claims. If you enjoy learning about stories often omitted from mainstream history, consider supporting us on Patreon or joining as a YouTube channel member to access exclusive content and be acknowledged in our episodes. Thanks for watching, and remember to like and subscribe for more hidden histories.